Well, another season of The Ultimate Fighter has come to a close. And of course, we had some pretty good fights. A lot of finishes. This is the first card, I think, in a long time that I think had all finishes on it. To be honest, actually, it makes breaking the fights down a little bit simpler because obviously a large portion of the fights that we talk about are how to score the fights, who really won, what to build on. But like, there is something tremendously final about almost everybody getting knocked out. There's not a ton to talk about with a lot of them. It was a good card. It was a very solid card, despite the sort of silly nature of the Ultimate Fighter and how honestly neither winner feels like a long-term investment in the UFC. Neither in fact, the two losing finalists, I still think, probably have more upside, but not that much of one. And it's time for you to join Mio, and we're going to dive right in here and figure out what I think about this whole thing and where these fighters go from here, I guess. So Thiago Santos versus Jamal Hill. This was an interesting one because a lot of social media had Santos winning the third round, which I largely disagree with. I guess the one thing I should probably look at is the UFC stats for it. This will probably be about the only time I really look at the stats for this card because I think it's the only round that has a has particular interest in it. Let's see here. Per round. Numbers, please. Round 3, 8-6 strikes to 9-6 strikes, 23-10 total. I guess you could argue Hill really did very little there, and maybe that's a control round. I don't know. I thought the knees that Hill was landing during the exchanges trying to get takedowns from Santos were actually much more damaging than anything Santos had landed in the fight. Because the problem for Santos is that while his striking looked actually reasonably good in the first round, he was finding counter holes. He really started to, and his corner definitely wanted him to resort to a pressure wrestling game, kind of nonstop in the third and the second round. And don't get me wrong, I think the blueprint for how to beat Jamal Hill was written in this fight. I don't think he necessarily has the best range keeping game. I don't think he has necessarily the best takedown defense. And I think after the fight, he really talked it up about how he wants to fight Jan Blachowicz. I think Blachowicz will probably beat him. And I think very, very largely anyone with a really good wrestling game probably can. So, like, in a way, I feel Jamal Hill got exposed in this fight to a certain degree. But at the same time, he went out there. He got a very notable win over Santos. He is definitely counterable, but like Santos is one of the better counter fighters in the division. Wasn't able to turn those moments of counters into really hurting Hill at any point, putting him down, knocking him down, doing his thing. So, this points to a high level of durability at least. And if you give him people who aren't going to make it a wrestling affair or aren't very good at making it a wrestling affair, he'll probably continue to win. And I don't have a ton more to say about the fight. I just think that Santos is trying to make either a specific change to this fight that gassed him out, or this is something more concerning because this is how Santos is approaching things. It seems like his corner is very determined, actually, to not make this into a striking affair. And I think that's a really bad idea for him because eventually, Hill got him on his back and finished him with elbows and hurt him. And I don't know. I don't know what to do with a 38-year-old Thiago Santos who doesn't have the confidence in his striking game anymore. That's it's a weird place to be to really play anything. And it reflects in my thoughts about who his next opponent is. I put Dom Reyes or Jimmy Crute because they're two guys that he might still be able to beat. Like, Crute is a guy who will charge into counters and give all the opportunities in the world for Crute to work his classic, or Santos to work his classic game. Well, Santos allows him to lead. And in the case of Dom Reyes, that's another guy that really is trying to find himself right now. And as a result, two guys that are kind of trying to figure out what they are that haven't fought before and are still sort of at the top of the division. Feels like a fight that could be interesting. And for Jamal Hill, like I said, he wants Jan Blachowicz, and I don't have a great plan for him because looking at the top at 205, there's a lot of theoretical matchups that are already in play, or people like Rakic who are injured, and it makes kind of like figuring out what to do with him a little bit more difficult. I penciled in here Ryan Spawn because if nothing else, Spawn asked the question of what happens if Hill has to fight someone with a similar reach to him. I think a longer reach. I could be mistaken. Let's see here. Jamal Hill, 79-inch reach. Ryan Spawn should have something similar. 81.5. Okay, so it would put him at a reach disadvantage. And I'm still a little bit intrigued to what does Hill's striking look like against someone who has a longer range of engagement envelope, a longer range of places where he can be offensive, and what happens in that case. That being said, I mean, on the positives for Hill here, he's pretty creative. He got around Santos's defenses pretty easily, showed durability, showed cardio, both things that were question marks prior to this, and gets a W. So, you know, it's a good win for him, but it is also a fight that did suggest some problems down the road that he needs to address. And I don't know, there's a vibe off of Jamal Hill, and some of this is probably just like the hype package where he's talking about Chapter 1, this win, Chapter 2, this win, and just skips over the loss to Paul Craig, which should have been it should have been and maybe was a learning moment for Jamal Hill. But nothing he says, nothing he does kind of indicates that it was. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird because obviously MMA fighters have to be sort of living in their own reality and having that self-confidence. But like the Paul Craig fight and this fight to a certain degree, and even the Darko Sosic fight way back when, these are all fights that probably should indicate some of Hill's limitations, and I'm not honestly sure he's perceiving them to develop a style that masks them or correct them, because you have to acknowledge that there is a problem with your fight style before you can fix it. So, I don't know. It was a good fight, though. It was a fun fight. It was not as fun as you would want from either of these guys. There was some boring aspects. Watching Santos grind for takedowns is not the best use of Thiago Santos. It's not really what he should be doing. But there was at least a technical intrigue to the fight. Unlike, for example, Santos versus Johnny Walker, which was just a terrible, terrible fight. Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal. I felt really, really good about Vicente Luque's chances coming in. The first round didn't dissuade me on that exactly. Neal was getting some good counters in there, and there were some generally strong work from Neal, but like there was stuff for Luque. And then in the second round, he made some adjustments, brought in much more of a kicking game, which Neal struggled to respond to. Neal actually started going for like, you know, some level of takedown use, dumped him on a Muay Thai, kick catch, got him against the cage, worked some clinch game, started walking him down, and Luque put up a late rally at the end of the second round. But like, there were definitely some big concerns. And then in the third round, Neal rocks him, he backs up into the fence, and then Neal unloads on him. And it was peak Jeff Neal, because Jeff Neal's the critique of Jeff Neal is that there's not a lot of adaptability to his game necessarily beyond like just built-in things. Like he doesn't come up with new solutions or a tremendous amount of creativity. And this comes out like overhitting the head, for example, not working the body, not having a game that has unpredictability to it. And he throws like 8 uppercuts, the same uppercut, hockey fight style, to Luque, just to show that primeness off, and then does finish him with him. So like, you can't complain about it. This was probably the best looking Jeff Neal fight ever. But at the same time, like, everything that like hitches me on like thinking Jeff Neal, despite all the physicality, like the good power, the good hand speed, the ability to switch stances and fight off of either stance without loss of ability, the ability to throw reasonably good volume. It just, there are just so many short circuits is like the thought path of like just a complete headhunter that come up repetitively. Matchmaking wise, I couldn't find a lot of good stuff for Jeff Neal that would represent an up-and-comer fight for him. So, like, if we're not going to see Shavkat Rakhmonov in a bigger fight, I actually wouldn't mind seeing that fight. That could be really, really fun. And it might ask the questions of Neal of, like, okay, again, you're going to have an opponent that you probably just can't physically outmatch, that you're just not faster than, who has a deep game with some creativity. What do you do with it? Because I don't know, Luque did look a little bit faded here, and that kind of reflects in the fact that I want to see Luque versus Michel Pereira for his next fight. Like, for a guy who was on the verge of a title shot just 2 fights ago, to me being like, nah, Michel Pereira is totally the most likely, the most logical fight. It's not a good place to be. He didn't look faded against Bilal Muhammad. He did kind of look a little faded here. Looked a little bit like he was lacking a little bit of durability. Did look a little slower. Now, that could be that Neal is just very, very fast, or that could be that he is actually fading. But we'll see, I guess, because, you know, Luque's not done by any means, and he'll get a reasonably high profile fight even coming off of 2 losses. Zach Pauga Paunga was how they were pronouncing it, against Muhammad Usman. Kind of went like I thought. Like, the first round, okay, Paunga's got Usman frozen. He's throwing some nice creativity. There was a Superman punch in there. There were some head kicks in there. You know, Usman did briefly put him on his back, but he got right back up. And, you know, did his thing and got the round easily. Although, somehow Sal D'Amato scored that first round for Usman. What? What is that? That's the Sal D'Amato scorecard, I guess, in a nutshell. And then in the second round, though, Usman's explosiveness, his power, comes into play, and boom! Nukes him. And that was just kind of my thought, is that while Paunga is the better wrestler, Paunga is the better striker, the more creative striker, the guy who puts things into combinations much, much better, he is also the guy who is a 205er. And they talked about how he would stay at heavyweight. I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I think, you know, as a guy who carries a spare tire around, I'm going to say it, Zach Paunga has kind of my build. And while I would probably have to compete at heavyweight if I were to compete in MMA right now, that's because I'm still out of shape. And if Paunga really honestly wants to have a long-term UFC career here, it's going to be getting back down to 205. And I didn't hear him say that he couldn't make 205 anymore, but like the commentary did allude to it. So that does concern me long-term for him. For fights, I figure they want to give Muhammad Usman a winnable fight. They usually do like to have the Ultimate Fighter winners win afterwards. I kind of like the idea of him fighting maybe Josh Parisian, because Parisian is a similar test to Paunga, in the sense that he is not a particularly huge heavyweight in terms of like muscle mass. He's a kind of a soft middleweight again, or a heavyweight again, and a guy who isn't necessarily super athletic, but does win fights without being athletic. Does present a bit of a different question because he's a little bit more eager to pursue the clinch and a bit more of a wrestling game as opposed to Paunga. And it would be interesting to see what Usman can do with that, honestly. And there are all the physical qualities you need to make a good heavyweight in Muhammad Usman. It's a matter of him putting together an actual game, an actual style. It's really about it. So there you go. That's all I got for Usman. And for Paunga, I don't know. If he goes to 205, there's interesting fights. If he stays at heavyweight, I'm not that interested. Mostly because I think it points to either a lack of discipline or some kind of medical problem being in play for Paunga, and neither of those make for a particularly long-term interesting fighter. Juliana Miller just proved me wrong. Hands in the air. That's all there is to it. Like, this fight was Miller pursuing the clinch against Brogan Walker, getting it down, holding top position, doing her thing, and eventually TKOing her in the third round. I think ironically, in proving me wrong, though, it's actually a bad thing because Miller has based like kind of her entire social media footprint, MMA footprint on being this kind of wild and crazy fighter who's kind of can't miss, not because she's going to win, but because she's going to kind of do something cool and aggressive and arguably stupid. And in this fight, she didn't really bring any of that. Like, this was just kind of a grinding out performance where she took Walker down and eventually pounded her out. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, it's bizarre in the sense that, like, Miller answered some significant questions I had coming into this, which is, could she fight a smart game plan, stick with what's working, and could she physically match up with Brogan Walker? And the answer to all of those questions is absolutely yes. And at the same time, it kind of made her a bit dull. I don't know. We'll see. It could just be one fight trying to make a transition into something that's a little bit more controlled, but still brings the aggression, still brings the excitement. Like, there's hope for it. And again, she's in her 20s, young fighter. Put her up against Manny Bohm next, because Bohm is a very winnable fight for her, but Bohm has a better clinch striking game and a better counter striking game to possibly do some things, because Walker looked uncomfortable on the back foot, and I don't know. I don't know if she just expected Miller to be much less physically imposing than she was, which I can't disagree, because I thought she was going to be way less physically imposing or whatever. But I don't know. Brogan Walker did not show up to give her best in this fight, I don't think. As much as I want to give credit to Juliana Miller for having more promise than I thought, I just thought Walker fought poorly. And for her, I think she'll get something like the loser of Shayna Young versus Miranda Maverick. The Shayna Young fight feels about right. A fighter in a similar position that has some physicality, but not elite level physicality, and is going to have to develop a game that actually works with what she's good at to win in the UFC. And if Maverick loses, I mean, heck, you got a rematch of a fight that Miranda Maverick lost at a time when it feels like Maverick probably could use a massive pick-me-up. So I think either way that works. Augusto Sakai, Sergey Spivak. Spivak worked his takedown game kind of at ease. Did a good job. Like, Sakai was getting back up and anything, but like his offense was pretty much completely run down. I think he gassed out a bit in the second round and then just got kind of grounded down once Spivak established ground position to pound him down. And what's next for Spivak? It's kind of a weird one because the heavyweight is like 205, kind of like at the top, very either booked or injury heavy. And as a result, I kind of came up with a fight with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But even saying that now and coming to the conclusion before, I'm not sure I exactly love the fight. But it does make a certain logical sense. Rozenstruik did recently beat Sakai not that long ago. Spivak's beating Sakai here now. Why not? And for Augusto Sakai, the winner of the Jake Collier Chris Barnett fight I think would be actually a really good idea. I think those are fights that will tell us a little something, because like the thing with Sakai is he's lost 4 in a row, but it's arguably 4 losses in a row against guys who, depending on your specific criteria, are top 10 and at the very least top 15 heavyweights in the world. Like, it's a rough run. It's a very rough run. Like, Tai Tuivasa is right now fighting for a possible interim title shot, in my opinion. And then you have Jairzinho Rozenstruik, super hard hitter, supremely hard hitter. Spivak, who's a nice up-and-comer in the division. And I'm forgetting a loss. I think it's Overeem I'm forgetting. Yeah, Overeem. And Overeem, despite no longer being with the UFC, is still probably one of the 10 best heavyweights in the world. I mean, did beat Sergey Pavlovich relatively soon to his exiting the promotion. And Pavlovich is kind of a guy who's like fighting for a top 5 spot in the heavyweight division. And that was only in 2020. That was only 2 years ago. So, like, aside from losing on his way out to Volkov, Overeem's still very much a bad man. And there you go. Pardon me, he beat Pavlovich in 2008. He beat Sakai in 2020. So 4 years ago. So it takes a little steam off of it, but still. And moving on down here. Terrence McKinney just kind of destroyed Ghost Pupper Eric Gonzalez. And I don't have a ton to say about that. I still have a boatload of questions about McKinney. Can he go beyond a round? Can he, be a little bit more defensive against an offensive, potent fighter? And that's why I really would love to see him fight Thiago Moises. And for Gonzalez, maybe cut, but like to the lower end. Like if Mike Breeden is still on contract, and I don't know if he is, maybe that fight makes a lot of sense. Sam Alvey also lost. And I don't have anything else to say about this. He needs to be cut. That is 9 fights without a win. He's apparently made a lot of money, actually. Like, he himself keeps saying the UFC pays me really well. The UFC keeps saying we pay him really well. And honestly, the more recent times of like Sam Alvey's political views. And I'm not saying cut a fighter because of political views, because actually I honestly think that that's wrong. It's just that any goodwill that Sam Alvey had has to be gone at 0-8-1 his last 9 and being just kind of a Republican nutball. And like that just adds to it. That adds to it for me. Like for example, Colby Covington is a nutball Republican. I have never advocated for him to be cut because in the cage, he gets the job done. But if you're not going to get the job in the cage done, and you're just going to be basically a shit heel, you should be cut. And I've been calling for Alvey to get cut before I knew any of that. So there you go. For Michael Oleksiejczuk, I would love to see him fight Armen Petrosyan. If this 185 thing is going to be permanent, I don't want to see either of those guys fight people who are going to try and take them down. So put them against each other and just let the fireworks fly. I think that would be a great fight. Takeshi Sato got deaded by Brian Battle with a high kick. Battle wants to be nicknamed The Butcher now instead of Pooh Bear. I am never really a big fan of like self-given nicknames unless they kind of like are punished to the name. Like for example, one of my nicknames through combat sports was Dreadnought. That's because, my name is Michael, but the name my dad wanted to name me is Mutadread. And that kind of worked in. The Dreadnought, Dread, boom, boom, boom. And, at other times I've used nicknames given by other people. Butcher, it's a better nickname than Pooh Bear, and I am actually all for Brian Battle not having the nickname Pooh Bear. But it does kind of feel like it's got to be someone else who kind of christens the nickname. But that's just me. For Battle, I would love to see him fight Mike Malott. And this is another case where I'm like suggesting someone I'm not sure is on contract. Is Mickey Gall still with the UFC? If so, I think a fight between him and Takeshi Sato would actually be pretty good. Sato would give him the initiative, which I think Gall needs to function. And Sato would have a striking advantage and probably be really hard to take down. I don't know. It's not a can't miss fight or anything, but it's like, it's an effective use of two guys that I think are kind of on the way out the door in a relatively interesting fight. Corey McKenna ended up with the first Vaughn flu choke in women's MMA history in the second round, relatively early in the second round. McKenna fought much better than she did against Elise Reed. She went out there. She did impose a wrestling game. She did clinch. She did her thing. And it's just 2 thumbs up. Like, things have to go a lot further for McKenna to actually be a contender or whatever. Like, there's a lot of work to be done because there were moments where Granger was able to fight with her, and Granger is just not very good. Granger is just straight up. She is a big fighter, and that's kind of it. Like, that's what it comes down to, is like she's got size without any real technical background to impose upon it. I know she supposedly has like a really deep Taekwondo background, but I haven't really seen it. And McKenna should be onto bigger and better things. And I have the idea of her facing the Tabitha Ricci Baby Shark versus Cheyenne Velismus winner. I think that fits kind of like all parties involved. And for Granger, I don't know. She's lost 3 in a row. I kind of think she'll just get cut because losing to Amanda Lemos is not a problem. Losing to Ashley Yoder, that's a problem, especially by decision. And losing to Corey McKenna by submission, who has not had a submission victory up until this point, despite facing people who predominantly had grappling matches with her, is not great. So, I don't know. I don't have a lot of interest in seeing Miranda Granger fight in the UFC. If she goes out and she improves and she learns to use her size, like, the door open for a return, for sure. But I don't think she's not really winning fights in the UFC, I don't think, at this point. And I don't think she's asking questions of the people that she's fighting that solidly to keep her around as a test. So, I don't know. It's one of those ones where, like, I don't think we'll really see changes in her in the UFC because I think she'll just be losing. And yeah, that's kind of it. Mayra Buena Silva armbarred Stephanie Egger. Egger originally didn't really protest the stoppage. Then she kind of did. Then we ended up with a judge saying, yes, I saw the tap. And everything's sorted out how it should be. Silva gets the win by submission. I still do have considerable concerns about her fight IQ because while she won the fight, she engaged in the only fight that Egger could beat her in. And that's kind of been the Mayra Buena Silva hallmark, which is being a super physical fighter who can really get stuff done, but at the same time, being someone who doesn't fight with any thought to the opponent, what the opponent is good at, what the opponent is bad at. And I think that's just such a limiting factor. But her physicality does tend to carry her through a lot, and she did get the win. So I can't complain too much, but I do feel like I want to complain about it. I would love to see her fight the Raging Panda, Julia Avila. I think that would be actually a really good fight there. Those are 2 fighters that are kind of like on the same wavelength there, where they're like super physical, that they've gotten away with kind of just doing whatever they want in a lot of their fights. And as a result, they actually have some really questionable decision making. And I think it would be an incredibly sloppy fight. And / one where, like, okay, are either of you going to like develop a game plan to beat the other? Because there are massive gaps in both of your games. Like, it could easily work. And for Stephanie Egger, I just kind of like the idea of her fighting like Lena Landsberg. Because, like, you know, Ultimate like the two sides of clinching, basically. Landsberg's kind of Muay Thai elbow queen clinch against Egger's judo and armbar stuff. That'd be fun. And the other thing is, like, I don't know if either of the, like, I don't really predict either of them to develop, because, like, in the case of Landsberg, she's 40. In the case of Egger, it's not that she's particularly old. She's 33. But she's 33 years old. She's been fighting for 10 fights and 7 years without really figuring out anything, really. She just kind of is still the same broken piece of fighter, collection of hodgepodge skills that she was when she started. And that kind of makes me think that that's never really going to sort itself out. So there is that. Yeah, I don't have much else to add to the fights that happened. It was interesting to see the UFC not really talk about Josh Quinlan failing but not failing a USADA test. Essentially, the deal here that I understand is that they are claiming that Quinlan is pulsing. Essentially, they're pulling the John Jones rule out to say that Quinlan tested positive for this before, and it just hasn't worked its way out of the system. And there's probably some truth to that. There actually probably is some truth to this. Like, I said this when John Jones was given, when the fight was moved to keep John Jones on the card, and they first pulled the pulsing excuse. We are talking about something that has a remarkably little scientific fact behind it, which is PED use. Because while a lot of money has been poured into finding ways to detect PEDs, figuring out what common masking agents are used to block them, how to detect for those masking agents, and so on, very little has been talked about like how long does it actually stay in the body for? How long does it, I'm doing air quotes, pulse? How long could you expect to see a fighter who has been suspended for a PED continue to test positive for it in small amounts? Like, this is a legitimate question. The only problem is that the history of USADA and not owning their mistakes is like Josh Barnett proving that he had a tainted supplement and them still wanting to suspend him. And probably the same case for like Tom Lawler and various others who probably tested positive for something that they didn't ingest in a significantly large amount to actually gain a performance enhancing thing from it. And the fact that the international and even US supplements industries are terribly regulated that a tainted supplement is entirely possible. It's all kind of this giant gray mess. And I don't have a ton of patience for it, I guess. Ariane Lipsky and Priscilla Cachoeira also got yanked off this card when Lipsky was not medically cleared. She missed weight by 2.5 pounds, something like that. And had to go to hospital, was not medically cleared for the fight, was not allowed to fight on this card. And obviously Cachoeira wasn't either. Both of those fights have been rebooked basically for like a week's time. I actually don't really like the idea of Lipsky Cachoeira just being rebooked, because if the weight cut was so bad that you ended up not making weight, there is a significant question that has to be asked of, like, are you going to be okay on August 13th, 1 week from now, to have that fight? Did they move it up a weight class at least? Okay, they did. Okay, I feel better about this. They at least moved it to 135. I can appreciate that. Actually, not too bad. I still would give more than a week to recover from the unnecessary weight cut / the hospital trip and everything to get a good fight out of that. But I understand that you want to move fast on it. So actually, one thumb up, one thumb down for the UFC on how they're handling that. And that's really about it. This is a short episode today, under 40 minutes, because... did I say who I did. Avila. for Bueno Silva. Rather short episode today because one, we only had 10 fights, and two, the fights all ended in a finish, and we're I don't have a lot to say. Like, I mean, how much detail can I really put into a Brian Battle knockout of Takeshi Sato in 44 seconds? Like, that's kind of the problem. As per usual, check out the link tree that will be in the description of wherever you're watching this. That will lead you to the social media, the Discord, the Facebook, other places that you can listen to this podcast or watch this podcast on YouTube, and all of that fun, all that jazz. So, with all that said, keeping it short today. Have a good day. Check out the Discord. Fighters, the fight sim is actually really, really fun, and there will be another month of action posted today or tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure which. Depends on how much time I have today. So I'm going to go get some food. Hope you guys enjoyed the fights. Tune in probably Thursday for the next prediction video.